Welcome back to the King's Law Podcast. Before I get started, I just want to say everything that I talk about in regards to law is on the King's Law website. It's www.thekingslaw.com. You can go there and you can filter it. It's going to pull up a list of all the laws. You can filter by category, certain topics like marriage, whatever, book. Then chapter of the book, and then you can filter by text. That's the last box where you can type in anything that you want, and it'll find if one of the laws has that word in it, it'll filter the list to laws with those words in it, so you can see specifically what you want to see quickly, right? If you're looking for something and maybe in discussion with somebody and somebody says it doesn't say that, you can filter it, you can look at it, and then in the bottom corner you can see the book, the number law it is, so that the person can look it up too, and then you can see the verse and the chapter, so you can go and verify what you see on the screen in your Bible or whatever you use, right? And that's all. And to get a hard copy, please go to the shop or click the link at the top of the website and buy a copy of the book to help out. That would be greatly appreciated. Today's topic is the law versus Islam. It's not specific to Islam. I'm doing all the religions. I think I talked about God versus religion and how religion falls outside of law because it's a human construct, and it's a group of people who have human rules. Usually they relate the rules of their group to God, and they say they're a God-fearing group. But one of the points made in that podcast is that it says it plenty of times in the law, more than twice. It says that you should follow the law, all the law, and do no more or less than the law, right? So for another group of human beings to come to you and say they're giving you new instructions in the name of God falls outside of God's law, period. But I'm going to have the individual discussions just to highlight certain points. And this discussion topic is Islam, which is in America is gaining popularity. I'm from Philadelphia. I was born in Delaware. Spent a lot of time raised in Philadelphia and went to school there and things like that. And Islam is very popular in Philadelphia. The prison is very popular in general in Pennsylvania. They'll send you to jail at 12 years old, and you can keep going to jail until the day you die, right? This prison is very popular. The juvenile hall system is one of the, at this point in time, has been reformed in the past few years, but over the past 100 years, every other state have reformed their juvenile system except for Pennsylvania, right? So it's very easy for you as a minor to get into the jail system and become a regular and spend your life there. And from my observation, right, I'm only going to talk about things, like I said in past podcasts, I am not omniscient. I'm only going, and I don't want to make any of these episodes about my opinions. I'm only going to talk about what's in law, and if anything that I may try to relate to, it would be something I've seen directly in my life. I'm not going to go based on what was seen on the internet, what was seen on YouTube or wherever else, because that's not something I verify for myself, right? So I can only give you accounts from my life, and I would say Philadelphia is one of the most popular places for Islam in America historically, right? Has the most Muslims of any city in America. I don't know if that's true anymore, but that was true for a very long time. And so I'm familiar with the culture, not so much the religion, because I've never read a Quran. I've never been a part of that at all. But I do know the culture in America as far as the Islamic culture in Philadelphia, which involves a lot of native brown Americans and Africans coming from actual Africa, right? Not the Nigerians and things like that. They, from what I've seen, have been converted at one point in time. A lot of the Nigerians, the Western African countries are Muslim, But a lot of the brown Americans, ones who don't necessarily come from Africa, right? They might have come from South Carolina, wherever, and then they don't know where they come from before that. They were there for a long time. They weren't raised that way, but they go to the prison system and get converted for one reason or another. I don't know, because I wasn't there. But like I said, I've never read a Quran, so I'm not going to quote anything from the Quran. I'm only going to give you accounts of what I've seen from being in a very heavily Muslim influenced city and going to Muslim countries and kind of relate that to law. Because it is gaining popularity. I see a lot of people on YouTube and things like that. They go for a long time and then they say, oh yeah, I'm Muslim now, I'm in Dubai and things like that. And like I told you in the beginning, I want to give a refresher for anybody who hasn't heard anything else. I am not religious. I follow the law, the Mosaic law, right, which is what is on thekingslaw.com. And I don't know of any religion that falls within law, right? Whether it be Christianity, Judaism, Catholicism, Muslim, Islam. I don't know of any religion that falls in law, right? And you can go to the Law or God versus Religion podcast, which came before this one, and you can hear what I have to say about that and the points that I make of the points that I make that contrast or kind of point out the differences between law and religions, right? And how people conflate following God with following your religions and where that can lead you astray. But the topic today is Islam, the law versus Islam. And one thing I can say about Islam, we can point out blatant, we can point out what's visible to us, right? So one thing from going to Muslim countries and from being around people who've converted to Islam in Philadelphia and things like that, they say they follow God, the same God that is in the Bible. That God would be the same God of Judaism, right, and Catholicism, the God who delivered the Mosaic law to Moses on Mount Sinai in Egypt, right? When I say God, that's who I'm talking about. Some people say Yahweh, some people say other things. I don't speak Arabic, so I don't know exactly who they're talking about, and I'm going to get into that later on. So I'm not going to say the other word because it says right here, this is Law 88 right now. This is Exodus 23. Verse 13, it says, do not speak or mention the names of other gods. That's a law, right? So if you mention anything else from any other religion, I'm saying that's outside of law. You're not supposed to, right? You're not supposed to bow to any statues or idols. You're not supposed to have things made out of, things that images that look like something on earth or something in the seas or anything like that. And yet, that's made out of stone or precious or metal or things like that, right? Or wood. So with that being said, Islam, from all the people I've spoken to, they say it's the same God that is in the Bible, in the Torah, right? The God who delivered the law to Moses on Mount Sinai. And that, may be very well true. I just don't know for myself, so I'm not going to use the name. But one thing I can say is, they say they accept the prophets as far as, the prophets from the Bible and Jesus, and they say Moses was a prophet and things like that. And if that is true, they accept Moses and what he got from Mount Sinai, and they acknowledge it as true, which they do. I've never heard a Muslim say that they don't acknowledge that Moses is a prophet and what he got was true. Then that means that they are supposed to follow the law, God's law. Because a lot of people, they conflate, they don't conflate, but they kind of minimize the delivery of the written, the human readable law to Moses, as that only applies to Israel, right? But that is not true, because if they say they believe all the prophecies, right, that covenant that God had with Israel to follow those rules was broken and it was expanded to the rest of the world. right? So we all have the ability to take ourselves from, the pit or hell, whatever you want to call it, whatever your reality is that is not blessed at this point in time, or, in the past or in the future. And you have the ability with your actions following the law to move into a blessed life that is easy and very well taken care of, right, by God. So with that being said, them accepting Moses and, the prophets from the Bible and things like that, and Jesus, right, then they believe that they believe in the law, right, the Mosaic law. And in Mosaic law, there's only one God, right? You're not even supposed to mention the name of any other gods, right? Whether you believe them to be around or, accessible or not, you're not even supposed to mention their names. And with that being said, I don't know the term that they use for God. I don't know, because I don't speak Arabic, so I don't know what it's for, so I'm not going to say it. But I've been to Muslim countries. I've been to Egypt. I've been to Jordan. I've never been to Lebanon, but I've been to the Middle East, right? I've been to those two countries. I'm going to name those off the top of my head. And in those two countries, the gentlemen that I have met who were kind to me, right, and who made sure they took, because when you're in Egypt, you got to get to and fro, and there's a lot of traffic, and there's a lot of things that were going on in the past years that make it hard to get around. And I'm not going to say they were bad. They took care of me very well, treated me like a brother, and I appreciate them, right? But one thing I did know, not one thing, what I did notice was that they have other gods, right? When I was in Egypt and in Cairo, they spoke about other gods. And that was the first time in my life where I had heard anything like that, like someone speak like that. Because this was before, in a past episode, I talked about going to Japan. And I talked about how they are idol worshippers and they bow to idols and have shrines and things like that. So that was recent, right? This when I was in Egypt, that was a year ago. The people who I talked to and who were showing me around, they were talking about the gods, plural, and when they wanted me to buy some, some papyrus and some souvenirs and things like that, they were like, hey man, this has this symbol on these, and this has these guys on it, and this is what that means. And they were trying to explain. I'm just like, hey, okay, like, all right. Cause I heard about these things in the Bible, but I didn't think it was like, I understand the Bible to be true, but I thought it was back then they thought like that, right? Oh, there's this God, there's that God for that, there's this God for that, and I thought that was back then. But no, that is today. That was 2020. That was the beginning of 2023. I had these conversations and they were very open about it. And I have never heard a Muslim in America speak that way, because that is very taboo to speak that way in America. And I don't think the people who come from Islamic countries speak that way in America when they migrate, because they know it's bad. So if something that's part of your culture is, is bad, and you don't use it when you're in front of a one God fearing culture, then I don't know how honest you're being, to be honest. I'm saying, because there are a lot of people in America who convert to Islam based on them being told that no, it's all the same God. But when you go to an Islamic country, and this is a point that I made earlier, right? You gotta know the people. You gotta actually go to the person's house who you're taking advice from, who you're taking advice from on how to worship and whom to worship, right? If you go to their house, which most people, if you're in the prison system, you get converted to Islam, I don't think you had the chance to go to an Islamic country yet. And a lot of people in Philadelphia and a lot of these cities around the country, they haven't had the chance to go to an Islamic country yet. They have other gods, and you can say, okay, well, that's just Egypt. Egypt has that's in the Bible, but when same thing in Jordan, right? They spoke about a lot of things that that pertain to other gods. And to take it a step further, when I was in Israel, one of the times I was in Israel, they have shooks, and Israel is despite what people believe, Israel is very Muslim, right? Like from what I've seen, like in Jerusalem, in and around Jerusalem, there are more Muslims than there are Jewish people, from what I've seen. So when you go to the shooks and things like that. There are, Jewish stores in the Shuk, and there are Muslim stores in the Shuk. When I say there are Jewish stores and Muslim stores, I mean, owned by someone of the Jewish faith or Judaism, right, and someone of the Muslim faith, right. And from what I've seen, they get along for the most part, and have beef and things like that. I don't know how much of that is fake because they all just trying to keep the peace. But they seem to get along, and then there's random outbursts and things like that from one side to the other at different points in time. But one thing I do notice is that in the Jewish stores, you can't find statues of things, right? You can't find statues of Jesus, right? And you would say, okay, most Jewish people don't accept Jesus. But but outside of that, like, you can't find a statue of anything, right? You can't find a wooden thing that looks like a bird. You can't, because that's in the law. You're not supposed to be carving images out of wood, right? You're not supposed to be making, carving images out of stone. So when you go to Jewish establishments and when you go to Jewish stores, you can't find any of that type of merchandise. You can't find a little, bird pendant, gold pendant to put on the chain. You can't find any of that because they recognize that as being outside of law. We're not supposed to make any carved, engraven images out of these things, and they don't do it. But in the same Shuk, if you go to any Muslim store and you want that type of merchandise, you can get that type of merchandise. Now, these are very faith, right? Just based on their location, right? These are very faith based. These are people who are living their lives based on faith in God, right, or whatever they believe in, right? Because in Jerusalem, you have scenes like, or you have places to visit like the Tomb of David. You had places to visit like for Islam, the Dome of the Rock and things like that. And these are supposed to be like the most holy sites, right? So all in Jerusalem. So I'm going to make I don't even want to make any opinions, right? But a lot of the people who these stores in the Shuks are selling to are tourists, right? And a lot of the tourists that are coming are based on their religious tourists, right? Whether they be Muslim or Christian or Jewish, right? And they sell to these people, and the Jews, they stick to law based on what they sell, but the Muslims do not. They have everything in there, all different types of statues and whatever else, made out of wood, stone, precious metals, whatever it is, they got it, right? And it seems very secular. And I would say in another case, while I was in Japan, completely separate, I did meet a guy who was Muslim out there. He's from Lebanon. His family's from Lebanon. And, when they were, I was on a tour when he met him, like a walking tour through Osaka. And he was turning away when the guy was talking about the shrines and things like that. He's like, man, that's crazy how they just make up gods and things like that. And I was like, yeah, that's right. But like, that stuck out to me that he said that, because I'm like, I've been to Muslim countries and they got plenty of made up gods, right? For this and that and whatever, right? Whatever they want to make it up for. So I asked him about that, right? He seemed approachable. I didn't think it was going. I ain't ask him like on some beef or anything like that. I just asked him like, kind of like curious. I'm like, okay, well, you're from Lebanon. Your uncles and whatever are from Lebanon. I'm like, okay, so I've been to that. I told him like I've been to that area plenty of times, right? I've been to, all over Israel. I've been to all over Egypt. I've been, through Jordan, whatever. And I was like, in that area, I'm like, a lot of the Muslims have other gods. I'm like, the first time I ever heard of people talking about other gods and things like that was in Muslim countries. I'm like, it seemed pretty common up there. And he was like, he didn't even deny it. He did not deny it at all. His response to me was, and this is a guy, he's from California. You know what I'm saying? But he wasn't very rooted in his faith, like walking around wearing a kufi or nothing like that. But you know what I mean? He didn't like the fact that they were showing shrines and stuff like that, right? So I was like, it just made me curious to ask him, like, because at the end of the day, this is all Asia, right? When we're talking about the Middle East or the Semitic land, which is, another word for the Middle East, that's West Asia. Right, when I'm talking about Japan, that's East Asia, right? So we all talking about Asia. So at this point, I've been to the furthest side of the West. I've been to the furthest side of West Asia. I've been to the furthest side of East Asia, right? So I'm like, okay, well, everywhere I go in Asia, there's idol worshippers, right? So I'm thinking like, okay, it's a common thing in Asia. People like to worship idols. You know what I mean? So it made me prompt to ask him because I'm like, okay, I seen it in East Asia. I mean, I seen it in the West Asia. We're seeing it in East Asia. So why does he have a problem with the idol worship going on in East Asia when it goes on in his culture? So I asked him, and he was like, "Oh no, those are those." He didn't say, "Oh no." He was like, "Yeah, like you right," but he was like, like they have different sects, and there are different people who claim to be prophets and things like that." And he was like, they'll make a sect out of the Muslim religion, and people will just follow that. He was like, there's this town in Lebanon that my uncle works in, something like my uncle used to work in or do contracts in or whatever, and they all worship some guy in the town who was like. He's like he's kind of like the a respected and revered guy in a town. He's their god. They worship him. They actually pray to him. And I was like, that's strange. He was like, yeah, but he was like, anywhere you have weird one-off things going, but I'm like, I tell him, I'm like, well, in Egypt it seemed pretty common. I was like, from the men to the women, everybody that helped me in the stores, like they was talking about it openly and freely, and I never heard that before. And he was like, yeah, but those are different sects of Islam. But like I just said earlier, I've never been to a Muslim country, and there may be plenty of Muslim countries that do not have different gods and idol worship in them, right? But matter of fact, I'm not gonna say I've never seen a Muslim person bow to a statue, so I'm not gonna say idol worship, because in Japan they're not Muslim, they're atheist, and two other religions that are not Islam, right? So they but like I said, like I haven't been to a Muslim country where they didn't talk about other gods, right? And I want to make one point. I was in a store at one point in time, and the way, like, sometimes people think I'm Jewish the way I, like, not Jewish, like Jewish like I follow the law, but they think like I'm like a part of like Judaism, like Talmud and all that, and rabbis and whatever else. And so a guy went into a Muslim store, and a guy. I didn't know it was a Muslim store though, because it was surrounded by all Jewish stores, and at the time, I had just landed in my previous visit to Israel. There was a lot of conflict between the Jewish people and the Muslim people, so I didn't think they got along like that for there to be a Muslim store in a shuk right next to like 3 Jewish stores. You know what I mean? I thought they had 2 different sections or whatever. So I went into the store thinking it was a Jewish store, but I was surprised when I got into the store because it was the only store I had been in that had statues and things like that made out of wood and metal and things like that, right? Like you can't find those in Jewish stores. So I didn't point it out to the guy. I just noticed he didn't have on like a yarmulke. And I was like, oh yeah. I was like, oh, that's crazy. Like, where's your yarmulke or whatever? He was like, oh, like, it's on me all the time or whatever. And then he didn't say he was Muslim to me for a long time. I bought some stuff from him or whatever. And then I don't know, he was talking to me and he was calling me a good guy. Like, he was like, man, you a really good guy. Like, this and third, da-da. He's like, I never met somebody like you from America or whatever. He's like, you follow the law and this and third, da-da-da. He's like, that's amazing. Like, such and such. And I was like, I was just like, oh yeah, like, I mean, that's just what I do. Like, I just, I read this and, like, it seems like that's what's in the Bible. Like, from my point of view, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm crazy, but that's what's in there, right? I read it and I got to do it, right? And towards the end of our conversation, after everything was said and done, I was like, he asked me about something. I was like, I don't know, that's up to God. And he was like, or, the word that they use for God, right? And I was like, that kind of threw me off because I'm like, why would you even need to make that distinction? If it's the same thing, like, why would you need to say or this? You know what I mean? Like, if somebody came to me and they were like, like, ay Dios mío, you know what I mean? Which is, I think is, oh my God in Spanish, right? And they said Dios and they said that in Spanish. I'm not going to correct you and say, or God. I'm saying, because it's the same thing, 2 different languages or whatever. But I might be wrong. That threw me off a little bit because I know there's a lot of people I know in some in my family, blood family, right? We don't really talk anymore or anything like that. Like, they have read the Quran, right? They've given it to their kids and stuff like that. They don't claim to be Muslim. They might be Muslim. I don't know. But he's like, oh yeah, it's all the same thing, all the same thing. So I'm like, maybe it is, but I'm like, after you follow the law, or like after you know the law and you studied it, like most religion falls outside of law, and most religion makes no sense, because when you have the law and you're not supposed to do any more or any less than it, like what do you need all these other books for? Like, it's really simple. Like, everything else is just complicating what you're doing, right? You bringing in all these other stories and whatever else. If you know the law, respect the law, and you follow it, like, you don't need a whole bunch of, you know what I mean? Like, you don't need all these other expansion packs. Like, what is it for? What is it gonna do for you? You know what I mean? But this guy I'm talking about, who's in my family, he used to say that all the time. It's the same thing. It's the same exact thing. But mind you, this guy has never been to these countries. He's never heard these people speak that way. That's why when I talk about law versus religion, that's why I caution you all before you start, praying to whatever somebody's praying to, or supporting their religion and things like that, in whatever capacity, and start, maybe the capacity that you support is saying that it's all God, right? Because that might open somebody up to turn to that, whether it be, Buddhism, Islam, or whatever. I'll tell you, you need to go to these people's countries first, and go to their homes first, and see what they do when they're comfortable in their home. Because I've been to these Muslim countries, and they talk about other gods all the time. I'm not talking about just the name they use and say that's God. I'm talking about other gods. Like, the Egyptians got other gods. Like, they say the gods. This is the God of this. This is the God of that. Not in the Bible. I'm talking about 2023. It's how they talk. Now, I don't know how you could say Moses and what he received on Mount Sinai is valid, where it says don't even mention the names of other gods, and it says don't have any other gods, and don't have any gods before me, and don't bow to this, and don't do this. I don't understand how you can tab that and say that's valid and still do that. That doesn't make any sense to me, and that's a pretty big deal, right? Because the punishment for somebody trying to influence somebody to go follow other gods in the Bible in the law is death. I'm saying, and I'm not making that up. I could go look. I could look that up right now and tell you where that's at, so you don't think I'm just talking. Let's see. Give me 1 second. That's why I caution. You know what I mean? If you in prison, or you on the street, and some guy comes up talking to you nicely about Mormonism, and read the Book of Mormon, don't bother reading the Bible or the Torah, or read this. If somebody tells you, man, make sure you go to that person's home first. You don't know what they could just be telling. Nah, man, it's all God, man. We follow God the same. They could just be if they don't believe in God, they don't care. Just telling you whatever you need to hear. So you start supporting their religion, because at the end of the day, when you start supporting their religion, right? You go to the Mormon church. They got a huge building in DC. You know what I mean? Like, if you start supporting them, it's at the end of the day, that's money for them. They don't care what you believe in. It's money for them. At the end of the day, and I'm not one of those guys who's like, all religion is a racket or whatever. But at the end of the day, if you have a guy from somewhere and he's like, look, I have my group, and my group needs money and buildings so we can spread our message, or whatever the purpose may be, right? At the end of the day, he don't care. He needs the money for his group. You know what I'm saying? Like, he can tell you anything. So make sure you go to this person's house and check out what he's talking. If it's other guys and stuff like that, bro, you don't even need to do that. If you believe in God, you can't do that. Right? But check it out first. Go to his home and see. You know what I'm saying? Because I've heard people say the same thing about Buddhism. And I'm like, how is that even possible? If you go to Japan, go to the, see these Buddhists, whatever, they in there worshiping idols. So how is that, like, what about that has to do with God at all? Period. You can't do that. As far as the law that goes, and that was delivered to Moses, you can't even do that. So how would that be related to God in any other way? Right? And I know there's religions that are Christian that do that same thing, right? But that's not what this conversation is about right now. I will get to that. Right now, we're talking about Islam. And I can tell you for a fact, I've been to Islamic countries, and Yes, they do have other gods. Period. The ones I've seen. You know what I'm saying, there are plenty of other Muslim, Muslim countries out there like the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Indonesia, things like. I've never been to those places, but for the places that I have been to, for sure, talk about other gods. Unless the only time I don't hear them talk about that is when they're around other people of other religions and cultures who they know do not have multiple. But when they're in their country, that's what I hear. You know what I mean? So at the end of the day, you don't know what's real. Now, one thing I do notice about their counterparts in that region, right? Jewish people, the Jewish people are Jewish people wherever they at. If you go to their homes, they respect the Sabbath. They do the, you know what I mean? If they out in the shuk and they want to sell you something, they only gonna sell you what falls in law or what falls in their religion. You know what I'm saying? They are the same in whatever setting. If you come to America, you know what I'm saying, there are a lot of fake Jews in America, right? Fake Jews in America who don't actually follow the law, things like that. They just call themselves Jewish, and that's another conversation, another topic. But for the people who are Jewish, actually observing and following the law, a lot of them fall away from rabbis and whatever else because they like, look, that don't really follow what God is talking about. You know what I'm saying? And some of them still do, follow that in the same way that Christians still, go to church and have their pastor, right? But at the end of the day, these people are the same no matter where they're at, right? They have the same God in their country, in their home. They have the same God wherever they go, and they disassociate themselves with things that make them uncomfortable. Now, in the Muslim culture, and I'm just telling you what I've seen face to face. I can't tell, like, I'm not gonna tell you, this is what I heard. I'm telling you what I've seen from face to face. When I go to Muslim countries and there's no other culture there that, they might want to be friends with or sell something or whatever else, these people talk about other gods, man. Because I'm telling you, I've been in a Muslim country and, been on a tour, where there's a bunch of people from America at that point, Christian Muslims or, whatever Muslims. And I don't know. There's a bunch of different things based on what the situation is at the time. So you can take that how you want to take it. But those are the facts of the matter from what I've observed. And just using logic and reasoning, if somebody has something different to say based on the situation that they're in, usually they don't stand for believe in anything, and I'm not saying that there are not people in the Muslim faith who do not believe in God, who do believe in God. I'm not saying that there are people in the Muslim faith who do not believe in God, but I strongly believe that those people may have converted and have been told some things, and they don't really know how, in Muslim countries things operate. Because a lot of people don't go. A lot of people will say, hey, just go to the UAE. And these places are kind of like the, modern day, very, very accepting places for you to come do business and spend your money. And like I just said, yes, people say whatever when they want you to come spend your money, when they want you to come fund their economy, right? But when you go deep into some of these countries that don't have those incentives, like Egypt, that's self-sufficient, right? Egypt is rich, period, right? Like they don't need any help from anybody outside, right? They do have beefs with different regions and different countries and things like that keeps them cut off from certain economic advantages or certain global trade advantages, right? But I mean, if you go to the country itself, right, they are rich in resources. They got granite, limestone, whatever resource you can think of, beautiful beach lines, big cities. They without anybody coming to Egypt, is self-sufficient, right? Whether you want to call some people, in kind of like modern Muslim countries like UAE or whatever else, they'll be like, oh, that's the poor man's Middle East or whatever. But at the end of the day, when you look at the resources they have there, I'm like, but like just based on land. Like it's a very rich land, so you could take that and the way you want and go explore for you. I strongly urge people to go and see for yourself. If you think I'm just making this up, go see for yourself, because a lot of these places you can't get to unless you take some risk. Like Egypt, you can't really get to the Sinai or Sinai Peninsula without taking some risk, right? You're gonna have to go across the border, and there's an advisory not for you to not go there and things like that. But you can go there, right? So most Americans would never go, so they would never see or hear these things. But if you go and see, you'll see what I'm saying is true, because they're very comfortable there. Now, when you go to these very global places like a Dubai and things like that, yeah, they are the economy is depending on outside money, whether it's buying oil, whether it's coming there and buying a second home, whatever it is. So you take what you hear with a grain of salt. You're getting the nice version because you're needed at that point in time, right? And I'm not saying that country is in poverty or impoverished or anything like that. They need everybody else, but I mean, when you look at like kind of the setup of a Dubai and things like that, it's like a big Vegas, and it comes from a lot of people coming there and setting up things and people buying second homes there and things like that. So your presence, the outside world's presence, is needed there, and that's just like just looking at it. That's what the situation is. So you can take that and run with it if you like. But other than that, like if we get into the culture of Islam, like I told you, I've never read a Quran before or anything like that, so I can't speak to what the prophecies were in there and things like that. And that's not me being biased at all. Like I told you, if you haven't joined the earlier podcasts and things like that, go take a listen. But I'll say, I've said in other podcasts, I was raised Christian, right? So I've already seen the New Testament and read the Bible beforehand. See what I'm saying? But I'm not like I know without ever reading the New Testament, like the law is in the first 5 books of the Bible, which is the same thing as the Torah, right? The Torah is Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Those are the first 5 books in the Bible. Without reading the New Testament, all you need is the first 5 books of the Bible. All the laws are in there. You just gotta look for them. It's all in there, right? So everything else is kind of like an expansion pack that teaches you this is what happens when you don't follow the law, right? The New Testament teaches you, look, God will send you a prophet and you'll kill him anyway. He could be perfect. And he could be so perfect, all you had to do was turn to him and you'll be healed, because he is the walking embodiment of the law. And you accepting him, it means you're accepting the law and God, and you'll be healed because you'll be more in sync with the universe, just being in sync with this person because they preaching the law, right? He could be that in tune with the world and y'all still kill him. That's what that teaches you, right? Which makes it dangerous for a lot of people, someone like myself out here teaching this, but it is what it is. But if you go back right before that, like it's not necessary. If you have somebody who is preaching the law, like let's say, like I've given this analogy before, let's say you have the Constitution, right, which is America, which is the national law of the United States of America. If you had a rapper who came and rapped the Constitution for everybody, like you don't need that for the Constitution to exist. You can go read the Constitution. You know what I'm saying? You can say, oh man, such and such was the best rapper ever, or best singer ever, who sang the Constitution and made it very simple for everybody to understand. But it's like at the end of the day, you don't need that. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, you have the ABCs, the song, but you don't need that because you could just read the alphabet. You know what I mean? It's an expansion pack at the end of the day. It's an important lesson for you to learn. And just like the other books of prophecy and the books of history of Israel, they are very important lessons for you to learn because they are actual real world. They're historical events that happen that, prove if you go to Israel, you'll see a lot of the ruins of these things. If you go to Greece, you'll see a lot of the ruins of things that were mentioned in there, right? If you go to Egypt, you'll see a lot of the ruins in the still standing city of Cairo where a lot of these things happen, right? If you go to Italy, you'll see, the history of the Roman Empire, and you can see the Colosseums and stuff like that. All these things are mentioned in the Bible, right? And if you go there and walk through, you can see it in real life. Like, this was a real place. These were real people, and these were real events that occurred, right? When Jesus was around, right? I think it was Caesar, right? And Caesar existed. The Roman Empire existed. Yes, they did have control over said Israel at that time. It existed. It's a real kingdom. And that was their real faith. And there was a real Persian Empire, right? So these are historical events that took place. You see? But even without you knowing those historical events, just based on faith, if you chopped them out of the book and you didn't even go to any of these countries and you never have been to a museum and seen any of these artifacts or anything like that, without all that, based on just faith, you receiving the law is all you need, because that's all you need to follow, period. Right? But let's go back and review the law in contrast to Islam, right? Like, one of the most important laws is, this is all you need to do. Do no more, do no less, right? But in Islam and in Judaism, they have kufis and yarmulkes. They cover their heads with these hats. And they say it's required by God. But I've looked plenty of times, and somebody can email me or, whatever, write me a comment on www.thekingslaw.com. I've never seen anywhere in law where it says you have to wear a yarmulke or a kufi. I've never seen that in the law, period. Now, I know it says if you are the head priest, you are supposed to keep your head covered at all times, but y'all not priests, man. Y'all not sons of Aaron, so where are you getting that from? And then the same thing, this is the same thing in Islam and Judaism. The wives have to cover their heads. And they say it's a law. But I've read the law plenty of times, and there's no law in the law that says your wife has to cover her head or her entire body with a sheet, or have to put a wig. In Jewish culture, they put the women wear wigs. You know what I'm saying? But that's not in the law, right? And if it is, show me, please, but I haven't seen it. This is something I studied very closely over the past long time. Like, it's been like 4, 5, 6 years, right? And I've looked for this plenty of times, because I thought maybe I'm tripping. I'm like, man, this is Jewish, following the law, and Judaism are two different things. These laws come from the rabbis in a book called the Talmud, which is by definition in adding to the law, right? But that's another conversation, another podcast. Right now we're going to focus on Islam. I'm just give you some of the parallels between the two cultures, Judaism and Islam, right? In Islam, the women have to cover their hair, right? Or the cousin can't see the woman's hair, but like, they could say that's you looking on the wife's nakedness, but that looking at somebody's head is not looking at their nakedness. At least I don't think, right? That'd be like somebody seeing, like, nakedness is the private parts of that person, whether it be vagina, breast, whatever, like the sexual reproducing organs of that person. That is sexual, and seeing somebody's nakedness, right? Which covering the hair, I don't think covers that. But if it's in there, show me. But I haven't seen it. And then when we talk about like the pilgrimage and things like that to these other places, these people aren't sons of Aaron, right? And I don't know if they count themselves as priests, but they don't even call themselves priests. And these different holidays that you have, right, that I've heard of, like Ramadan and other things, right, that's not in the law. So, I mean, if you believe in the same God that delivered the Mosaic law to Moses, right, you should be celebrating the Passover. Jewish, or whether you call yourself Jewish or you follow Judaism or not, if you say that this is true, then you should be celebrating the Passover. That's mandatory forever. You know what I mean? You should be doing the Feast of Weeks. You should be doing the Feast of, I think it's the Day of Atonement, things like that. and no more, no less. Because like I said, well, I'm gonna save this stuff about Jewish for the Jewish podcast. But these are the only things you have to do that's in the law. They're saying, but these religions, and right, the topic today is Islam. They incorporate other things, which is sin. You're not supposed to do any more or any less than what's in the law. Nobody should be able to impose that on you based on you following God, right? Because that the problem is, right, you can have rules from work, right? A guy whose business you're working for can tell you, yeah, you got to show up at 9 a.m. because you're getting paid a check and you're working. Okay, cool. The problem that comes when you talk about religion is these people are basing you following them on God. They tell you this is God's rules. This is what God wants you to do. This will make you closer to God. This will make your life better, right? But how is that true if they're not following the law that God gave you? They just making stuff up, which makes them, at the end of the day, they are an extension of God. At the end, they feel like they're God. You see what I'm saying? But it doesn't make any sense. And for all you people, you know what I mean? I want to speak to all, a lot of young brown people around America who are getting converted to that religion. You have to take a second look at these things, man, and go look for yourself. Go look for yourself. I know there are a lot of different groups out there because I think I told you all, like, I've lived in Brooklyn as a kid, went to school and things like that. I know they have things like 5%ers and whatever else, Islam, all different types of things, right? But they all fall outside the law in different ways. So why follow it at all? They say it doesn't make any sense. You could just follow the law. But if you want to follow these things, right, then you make another man your God. He tells you you have to follow these rules to be, in line with God. But it doesn't make any sense because God gave you rules to be in line with God. And he's giving you rules that are out of line with God. So those two don't mix and they don't make any sense. But that is that's as much as I know about the religion. So I can't go too deep into, people might respond to me and they might go, oh, it says this here in this verse in the Quran or whatever. I never read it and I don't plan on reading it. And it's not a bias thing. I know the law and I don't need to look at that. You see what I'm saying? So I can't really, maybe you can get a guy who converted to Judaism or, I don't want to say Judaism because Judaism is a religion, right? Who is Jewish, and he can give you comparisons and contrast like, hey, that's why that falls out of line. But just the debate, like the conversation I gave you is just facts. It's just facts. If there are laws, which there are, that say you are to follow all God's statutes and commandments, right? And do no more than them and do no less than them. And a man comes to you and tells you, for you to get closer to God, you got to do this. And it's not in the laws and commandments. Then that is outside of law. That's wrong right there. And then when you talk about going into different countries and these people have different gods and they're Muslim at the same time, that means that they don't follow the law. They may have taken some things from law, right? Saying you can't make this way, you can't, sleep with your kin or whatever else, and don't sleep with anybody's wife or anything. They may have incorporated that into their lives, but when you look at it and say, okay, this is faith-based, and we're talking about the same God that delivered the law to Moses, who told you not even to speak the names of other gods, then how can you have statues and talk about this God is for this and this God is for that and things like that openly in your homeland and it not be wrong? If it's just a coincidence and it's just a slip because of culture, then cool, but that doesn't make much sense to me. And I don't think anybody can argue that point. You all can put it off on other people, but if you look at the religion itself, I find it's very hard to find a Muslim man who doesn't wear a kufi. It's very hard to find a Muslim man in America who doesn't make his girl cover up. It's very hard to find a Muslim man who actually follows the law and who isn't talking about the Quran all day. Just like it's hard to find a Mormon man who actually follows the law and isn't talking about the Book of Mormon all day. You see what I'm saying? So how are you inside the law and you never studied it, and that's not what's most important to you? How do you follow God without following his statutes and commandments? And you say, okay, there's a prophet that came and talked to me, and I don't have to do that. But if that prophet came after the law, which they did, right? Because they're basing a religion based on the God that delivered the law. So let's talk about order, right? The order was the law came first, delivered to a man. The law always existed because it's how the universe actually works, and it's how for you to stay alive, right? But it was delivered to man in a word format at one point in time, which precedes your prophet. And this is something I said in the past podcast. There is a law that says if a prophet comes to you, and even if his prophecy comes true, if he tells you the sky is going to turn green in 3 weeks, and the sky turns green in 3 weeks, if he tells you not to follow the law anymore and to go follow other gods, then you are supposed to kill. You're not even supposed to listen to him. You're supposed to follow laws. It's just a test, and you're supposed to put him to death. That's what it tells you in the law. So if you say you have a prophet that came, and yes, we do what he says, and there are these new rules, you're outside the law at that point in time, and you're not serving God, because the law tells you you cannot do that. So that is something that you shouldn't have ever done. So you can ride out with what you're doing, and you can say, this is what I'm doing because this is what my fathers did, this is what my father's father did, and this is what my father's father did, right? Or you can just correct it right now, and what I'm telling you is not my opinion. There is no argument that you could reply to me with where that is an opinion. That is an actual law that I've read on here before, and I'll name it right now. I'll tell you where it's at right now for the folks who don't want to go back and check that out. Just give me a second. It is law number 467. It's Deuteronomy chapter 13, verse 1 through 5. It says, if there is a prophet that has a dream and the dreams come true, and he tells you to serve other gods, do not follow him. God is testing your loyalty to law. You should continue to follow all God's laws and put the prophet to death. That is the law that was delivered to Moses. The same law that these religions confirm and say is true. Moses is a prophet from God, right? So if that is true, then how do you have a prophet who came after, who you developed a whole culture outside of law based on? That's all outside of law and should have never happened. Period. It's right there in black and white. So that's where I say, you know what I mean? That's where you can make your decision. You could be stuck in your ways, or you can say, you know what? Because at the end of the day, when you do take on these new rules from other people, you're placing a added burden onto your life. And you are separating yourself from the world that you live in. You are separating yourself from the universe that you live in, because this is God's world. He created everything in it, and he is the force that moves everything in it. Right? So when you say, I have now found a new human being who was a prophet, right? And now I have a new set of rules where we do these things in this culture. You have now, one, moved yourself out of line with the universe and isolated yourself, causing yourself to have undue enemies, right? Because at the end of the day, and this is a point that I really got to make, as people who fear God, right? We have to there's things that we created that separate us, right? Separate a Muslim from a Jewish person, separate a Christian from a Jewish person or a Muslim person, or, you know, a Mormon person or a Hebrew Israelite. We all have these things, right, that came into our lives at different points and we chose to follow, that separate us and cause struggle and strife. They cause poverty. They cause wars. They cause you to hate your neighbor. They cause you to kill your neighbor, which you shouldn't even be doing, right? They cause you to treat each other inhumanely, but it can be stopped. You can just stop doing that, because most of you all are following a religion that says, yes, Moses is a real prophet. And if Moses is a real prophet, and he did go up on Mount Sinai and he did receive the law from God on Mount Sinai, he brought it down to you. That law tells you that no prophet after that can tell you not to follow this. So you can say, I'm wrong and I just need to drop it. Or you can keep doing what you're doing and see where it ends. But in my opinion, if you look at I'm not even going to say in my opinion. If you look at the world today, there are conflicts going on. I'm not going to say all the conflicts. There are conflicts going on between different groups of people based on their religions. And when you look at the base of these religions, you know, there's a couple big, there's Christianity, right? And then there's the section of Christianity which is called Catholicism. Then there's Judaism. Then there's Muslim, right? These are the big four. And they go at it they're going at it right now in different parts of the planet. This is 2024, January, based on different beliefs, which may or may not have anything to do with God. But if they all claim to be believers in the God that delivered the law to Moses, and they claim that they know that Moses is a prophet, right? Then one, they should all be on the same page, and not, they should all be unified, period. Where they differ is where they decided to stop following the law. That's all what it would do. The only place that they differ is the point in time where they decided that the law doesn't suit them and they need this new organization with these new rules and they want to be that part of that group. That's the only place that they differ. They only differ. The only place where they're different is their pastor, their imam, their pope. That's the only place where they differ. But they all say they believe in God. So if you just drop it and just follow God's laws as you're supposed to, you will all get along. And the only enemy you would have is the enemy who is perpetrating evil on this earth. And evil would be one definition between all of y'all. The evil will be the evil that's described in the books of law from Moses. There would be nothing else. You all could just all come. It'd be that easy. You could put away all them different gods you got. You could put away all the different. You put all that away. And then some people may have valid arguments, right? If you go out to Far East Asia, or you go out to East Africa, or you go out to even West Africa, right? They have their different gods, and they say, well, this is older than that. I can't confirm or deny that. I don't know because I wasn't there. If you're talking about 20,000 years ago, right? But even if it did come X amount of years ago, why do all of you all reference God then in your modern day religions? All of you all, there's none of you all who deny that God exists. There's a lot of atheist people who have different problems with, their childhood, right? Who deny God. Or if you go far east, they say, well, we're idol worshipers. And they say, well, that involves no God. We make our own gods, right? So they deny God in that way. But, if your God is your God, then how do you have a new one every year who you make out of these people? Doesn't make any sense. And the religions I'm talking about are the biggest religions in the world, right? They all claim to be based in faith in God. The same God that delivered the law to Moses. And I want to keep reiterating this point, but he has these laws, and these laws in all these religions are being broken. So if you drop it, y'all would all be the same, period. And that's all I can say about that. So there's nothing really else to talk about. But for you youth out there, out there in Philadelphia, who might be watching YouTube, who might be saying this is all the same, I would say stick to what you know. And if you want to subscribe to that, I strongly advise you to get a ticket to go to a Muslim country first and see how they talk. I'm not talking about a new age Muslim country. I'm talking about a Muslim country. And if you can get down with all them other guys they talking about and whatever else, then that's for you. But if you don't know that and you ain't seen it, and you should go first before you start talking about the switch. Because I'm telling you, it's a guy, he can come, he can tell you, shoot, Christians, they just do whatever they want. They don't even have to whatever. And then the someone from a different culture, maybe from Islam, will come and tell you, oh, you know what, we have, we actually follow certain things. We actually pray X amount of times a day, right? We actually face the east when we pray, because God's house is in the east, right? We actually grow our beards. That's just like the law says, right? They're closer in following the law than a Christian, right? But with that being said, why don't you just follow the law? Right? Like, why are you picking your poison when you could just drink from the cup of life? You got one poison that says you just do as you will, and you got one poison that says, oh yeah, we do some of that stuff, and then we got our own stuff too. And he said, well, this one's more right than this one. Is that why choose the rightest or the wrongest? Why don't you just choose the one that's real, the base of all this, and drink from that? And I tell you, a lot of y'all don't choose it because it doesn't come with a big group of people behind you. It's hard bearing your cross out here when you actually want to follow the law, right? And you may live in a land where everybody doesn't follow the law, but they follow a religion that's based on the God that created it, the God that created the earth that you live on. You can feel it in your soul. You know somebody's not supposed to be having sex with somebody else's wife. You know that you're not supposed to be murdering. You know that's universal fact, not fiction. And then you might hear some things in church, or you might hear some things in Islam, or you might hear some things in the cathedral, or you might hear some things in the synagogue that speak to that inside of you, because it is inside of you, because it is the universe we talking about. But instead of getting pulled along with that, you might want to be like, if you're a Christian, you might want to be like the Jesus you say you claim to be like. You might want to go and do that research. If you're Muslim, you might want to be like the prophets who you claim to believe in, like a Jesus or like a Moses, right? And go seek that knowledge, because Jesus went and seek that knowledge. Moses went up and hiked the mountain and got it direct from God. You might want to be, if you say these are the people who you look up to, then why don't you be that and go get the law and study it and teach it to your sons as you are supposed to? Why do you need this group, this organization behind you? Are you scared to step out on your own? And if you are scared to step out on your own, and people might look at you funny when you say, well, nah, I read this, I don't actually have to do that. If you are scared, then are you a warrior for God? Are you truly strong? You know what I'm saying? Are you truly supposed to be chosen and be out here and ruling the world? Are you supposed to be out here ruling the world, right? And he said, well, maybe not. I'm really just a guy who's looking for a group of people. If that's what you say, then cool. But I'm gonna tell you, you might think you're making a safe decision following this, but I strongly advise you to go to this website. It's www.thekingslaw.com. I strongly advise you to go to this website before you make those choices and say this is the easy way, because I got my Muslim brothers, my Judaism brothers, my Catholic brothers. I got it and they'll support me. I strongly advise you to go to this website and find the chapter and whatever for the punishments for you living outside the law. It results in death if you don't change it. And there's a difference between death, you dying, you living a bad life, you being kind of stuck at a place, right? There's a difference between that death and death. Death means you are no more. Your line, your lineage is cut off. You have no more sons. You are dead. If it's really worth it, if that's really worth that to you, death, like real death, no more you, cool. You know what I'm saying? Because at the end of the day, the guy has a couple calling cards out here that might come before you that he got to get rid of out here, that you may replace, because, right, Islam may be more correct than Christianity, right? Because it said, okay, well, we don't cut our beards. We don't support, women divorcing their husbands. We don't support adultery. We don't support this, that, and the third, right? So it says, okay, well, you might be more in line than that, right? And then Jewish people may be more in line than that, right? But at the end of the day is going to come where none of that is acceptable, and you have to follow all the law, right? So why don't you do it beforehand? before things get tough for you, right? Because at different points in time, all these religions, it was cool, right? I mean, we seen, if you're an American living in America, you've seen the decay of the Christian church. You've seen how they've gotten more and more secular and outside with what they preach, right? I mean, you see they've gone from 7-day Adventists, or you gotta follow the Sabbath and things like that, to, man, we do whatever we want, da 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 da, such and such. Pray to this, pray to Jesus. You know what I mean? Pray to this. It's okay for you to be gay in the church. They do all that now. You know what I'm saying? And it's because it's a creeping infection. It's that you cannot stop unless you follow the law. Right? Because that's where it started. It started where somebody accepted, a group of people accepted that we can do more or less based on this body, right? And that body started out very close to the law, right? And then you say, dang, how did we get here? It was inevitable that you got to where you got. It's inevitable that now you're sitting in a church that just takes advantage of you while you die of diabetes. It's inevitable that it got to that point where your kids don't believe anything and they out on the street shooting each other. It's inevitable that it got to that point because you decided to step outside the law. And now you're dying for real. Now your families don't have any men in the house. Now those families are open and exposed to the elements outside because they don't have any protectors. And the children aren't being taught anything from their generations prior, and they lost. Right? That's what happened in Christianity. That's what's happening. You can come to America and see it. Right? And it won't be long till that infection spreads to these other religions. Right? Even Judaism, right? You go to Israel right now. I mean, it changed in the past couple of years to me. I spent time working in Jerusalem and things like that. And yeah, I would 4 years ago, things were a little different than they were today, right? You go there and there was a lot of people who would say, Tel Aviv is more secular, but we have this going on here, right? And then you see gay pride parades. I said, dang, how can you not be able to stop that going on in God's land? Got gay pride parades. And then you see raves. Girls running around dressed, dancing with barely anything on. You see all that going on, right? And you say, how did we, the people who were supposed to be claiming to be Jewish, following, how did we get here? It's because you follow Judaism. You're not just Jewish and following the law. You got the Talmud. It's going to creep up on you just because you have a counterpart who may be doing worse than you. Don't look at them and laugh and say, at least we not them, because you're going to end up being them. And that's for all these cultures who fall outside of laws, all these religions. You're going to end up at that point. It may not be today, but you will end up at that point. And you will not be able to get past, you will not be able to recover your culture, your people, your kid. You won't be able to recover and save them unless you just chill out and get it back to where it's supposed to be. Get in tune with the universe. Get in tune with universal law and drop everything else. That's what it comes down to. Whether you believe it or not. I'm saying you can go to and it's not hard to get these days. It's up there on the internet, and what's up there is going to get better over time. It's www.thekingslaw.com. You can go there and read it. That's all the church you ever need. And like I told you, I'm not a pastor. It's up there for free. All you gotta do is go look, read it. You ain't gotta do you don't gotta do what Jesus did. You don't gotta do what the other prophets did, right? You don't even have to do that. All you gotta do is go up there, look, say, all right. Even when you're making a decision, right? You don't have to go and consult your rabbi, your imam. All you have to do is go up there and look. Now you your own boss. Now you just in tune with God. You're gonna embody God. You your own powerful entity by being in tune with this universe. Or you can stay out of tune and see where that gets you. But I guarantee you, it ain't gonna be anywhere nice. It ain't gonna be anywhere nice. And that's pretty much all I have to say on this podcast. Like I've been saying plenty of times, right? For going and looking at the law, go to www.thekingslaw.com. It's very carefully constructed. The words that are on there are very carefully chosen, and the goal is to get this out there and get this translated into all languages so that it's easily understandable for everybody around the world and things like that, right? To read, and it's out there for free. That's what we here. That's what I'm here for, right? And that's pretty much it. Thank you for joining me. And then join me next time. Episodes come out Fridays Eastern Standard Time. That's, I think, +5 GMT, or it's -5 GMT. It's Eastern Standard Time, so like New York time zone, at 5 p.m. on Fridays. And that's it.